typically I try to stay in line with a flow for our Sunday learning time. And over the last 4 to 6 weeks, as we've been quarantined, a lot of our series has kind of been working on us to minimize or eliminate our fears, our depression, our misery, our sorrow, our sense of helplessness. And so the intention today was to get back on track to talk about the first century patriarchs and what we need to know and absorb from them. And then Erica dropped in to the works. So we'll chat about how that's occurred, but let's take a look at where our scripture foundation is going to be for today. We're again going to be in the Lord's Prayer, which is John 17. We're going to focus there on 20, verses 20 through 23. So let me read those. I'm reading from the NIV, by the way, and it says, "My prayer is not be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be as one, as we are one. In them, I in them, and you in me. May they be brought to complete unity, to let the world know that you have sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me." So we've been in the Lord's Prayer, John 17 there, this passage, for the past, this is our third week, and we took a look earlier at the component that was directed specifically to the disciples / apostles, of which in some ways we can consider ourselves, though, those folks, except the definitions aren't quite as precise, and we can talk about that at another time. This component of the Lord's Prayer is specific to all believers in general. And so I want to talk about that a little bit as we look to address the theme of today. The subtitle is "Then I Saw His Face, Now I'm a Believer." But the driving point today is, let's do what Jesus believers should do. And so when you read or when you hear what it is that we just read from John 17, what are the themes of this portion of the Lord's Prayer? What are the themes that jump out for you? Reverence. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Matt.
Before we get into those themes, would you like for me to sing the monkey song "And Then I Saw Her Face"? Do you want me to start with that? Would that help? Or do you think that would maybe distract from the overall purpose of?
Oh, no. I think that would be a bonus.
Let me mute off and go over in my head, and then I'll let you guys continue. I'll be back.
Oh, when you're reading, make sure you unmic yourself when that event occurs. So what are the themes from this portion of the Lord's Prayer? That's a question out to you folks.
Unity in the Father.
Yep.
And shared glory.
Okay. Those are certainly two very prominent components. Yep. Other thoughts?
To me, it's also not just a prayer for believers, but he's praying for those that the believers will reach, that they will come into the fold.
And how, in what way is he praying for those folks that believers will reach? How does that impact you and me? How would we label that particular aspect of this portion of the Lord's Prayer?
Like it's maybe this is wrong, but it's like it's our responsibility to reach out. He's to me it's like a directive. It's labeled a prayer for believers, but he says I also pray for those who will believe in me through their message, the message that we are responsible as believers to send out, to take with us, to show the world.
Yeah, I think you're very correct on that. So what might that collectively, what would that make us in terms of shepherding that responsibility?
I don't know how to consolidate it into a good term.
So if we think about foreign relations and we think about our, I wanted to make it more complex this morning, but maybe I'll just make it simple because it's Sunday and people's brains aren't plugged in as well as maybe they'll be plugged in later. We're ambassadors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Emissaries. And so that component says that we need to be living, breathing, walking representatives of the Lord Jesus wherever it is that we go. And remember, part of our past themes the last 2 weeks has been same as he ever was. And so the way that Steve reminded us that even when Jesus was in the throes of his crucifixion, he was still operating in the same way that he always had. And even today's study, we're going to take a look at Jesus operating in the same way that he did even after his resurrection. And so you can see that Sarah's plugged in some of my thinking that jumped out at me in this particular section. And Sherry and Jean, you both hit 3 of those topics that Jesus seems to be pulling and addressing all believers in general, that there's a sense of unity that he's praying about, that there's a sense of shared glory. And the question that came up for me that unfortunately when we plug in the answers here is I was going to ask you what glory is, because glory is a really neat Bible word. It's a really neat hymn word, but we really don't sometimes understand and define what it is. And so if you take a look at these 5 terms, and you may be able to add to it, that's what the sense of glory is its honor, its renown, its notability, its magnificence, its great beauty. And so when we talk about honoring and glorifying the Lord, it's a matter of showing him honor, showing him renown, of praising his magnificence and his great beauty. And not beauty like a hot Miss America or Miss Universe, but his beauty in terms of having created and flowing in and through all things that are created. And then that last item that Sherry described is emissaries and ambassadors. And so Jesus is praying that if we're good, he's praying, number one, that we're good emissaries and that we're good ambassadors, because by being good ambassadors and good emissaries, then we will lift him up, and by doing so, we'll draw all men to him through our being good ambassadors. Does that make sense? Questions, comments about that?
Preston, I might be jumping ahead a bit, but and this ties so beautifully into what I'm going to share in the next hour again. But it's so, to me, this is for me personally. When you talk about unity, believability, credibility, and then all those terms for glory, there's a sense in which that has to deepen within me and become very personal and become very real. If I'm going to express it with that same passion to those outside of the unity that we have as believers. And I would say to a large extent that the church has not done a good job at that, at falling in love with Jesus. You know, that you would read that very familiar text of, you've lost your first love. I think one of the least appealing things to a lost world is a Christian who's lost his passion for what he's doing, and it almost becomes an impediment at that point. So I think the emphasis here is a personal, deep, strong, passionate relationship with Jesus that almost overflows into you just naturally connect with other people because of that. So I don't think you can ever overemphasize that point that you're talking about in relationship to what it leads to, which is our witness.
Yeah, Matt, I don't think you're jumping ahead at all. In fact, that's kind of part and parcel of the next question, which is what's the importance of these themes? So, I talked a little bit about glory in terms of the definition and maybe a little bit of the application of honoring and glorifying the Lord. But, unity and believability, credibility, emissaries and ambassadors, I'm challenged to think that most church people consider themselves a part of the disciplines that we're talking about right now. Some of these Christians believe are solely the responsibility of the pastor, the preacher, the priest, the clergy, maybe the deacons, maybe the trustees, the eldership, but not the laity so much so. So what is the importance of these things? Matt's talking a little bit about representing Jesus well in terms of showing our love for him. But, one of the items that I have here that may be one that makes you shake your head a little bit is believability and credibility. What am I talking about there? How do you get that from this? And what am I talking about?
Well, two things. Number one, I wanted to add to the importance of the theme, the glory part for a moment. As you were bringing in the great beauty, I was reminded of Samuel going to the house of Jesse, trying to find who the next king was going to be. And the words that come to mind are, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. And that's how David was chosen, a man after God's own heart. And the great beauty that we have is not necessarily going to be, as you said, the Miss America, Miss Universe kind of look, or Mr. Universe, whatever. It's going to be what our heart looks like to Jesus. And that should be, the importance there is, that should be an esteem booster to realize how Jesus sees us. And we don't need to be all stuck in our own, foibles and, I've got this issue and that issue. Even in my heart, I've got these issues. How we are seen by the Savior is key. Regarding the credibility thing, I think it's incumbent upon us, because looking at verses 20 and 21, those who are going to believe through their word, there's believability, and that the world may believe that you sent me. So in order for the world to believe that, we've got to be believable as Christians. We've got to be credible. We've got to exhibit the things that we're supposed to exhibit as Christians in order for there to be this magnetic attraction to the Savior.
Brilliantly said, Gene. And I would tell you, one of the things that Christians do to make themselves poor ambassadors and to eliminate quality, believability, and credibility is they operate or act one way, typically on a Wednesday or Sunday, and then when you see them the rest of the week, they operate almost in a completely different manner.
But there's also another side of that I see in the world today. On occasion, I'm driving past this place on Hungary Road where they've put up an Islamic center. And most recently I did that, and I was reminded of a comment that one of my customers made one time where he was calling it the house of the devil. Okay? Sometimes Christians get known by what they're opposed to and what they dislike and what they hate, kind of like the article that I saw on the Slack line, rather than the love that we're supposed to show that Jesus showed. And by the way, I agree with Steve. The very last line of that article sounded a lot like hate to me. Love wins unless it has to do with Christians.
Other thoughts about the importance of these themes or that portion of the Lord's Prayer?
Preston, I want to add one more thing. And it's so ironic, and I think it's so, and I don't want to overstate this, but I'm going to use the word satanic, but Christians, we can't use that word unless it's a demon picture, and, it's right there in front of you, and it's out of a horror movie. Satanic is a very vague, not vague, very deceptive, because it doesn't look like what we think it may look like. And I want to say in my heart, and this is for me, that the whole idea of falling in love with Jesus deeply sounds so mushy. It should create this activism toward lostness in a broken world that is unparalleled with any other movement in history. Ironically, though, where the satanic part comes in, we have doubled down on what that means in the local church to mean more Bible studies. And can we extend our meetings with just us, even to the point where it's become so great of an issue that we have become very familiar with the term us four, no more. I reminded you guys of a story where I invited this millennial to church for years. I mean, like, her mother was a member of our church, and she finally came on a big day that I had. Showed up, sat down about 2 or 3 minutes early, sat down. Mom didn't even know she was coming. And a gentleman in our church who was in his 70s went up to her and told her that she was in his seat and made her get up. And obviously that went over lovingly. And so 10 years later, she finally gives her heart to Christ. 10 years later. And so here's a gentleman who I don't hate, but I'm so in love with Jesus that I have doubled down on my seat, my version of the Bible, what time church should start, what the music should be like, how you should dress, the words you should use. I mean, it's almost as if this falling in love with Jesus has done the opposite of what Jesus intended for it to be. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I can't disagree with you there at all, Matt. And I think certainly when we work together, I try to help us recognize the difference sometimes between churchgoers, people that call themselves Christians, and then true believers. And true believers are going to operate outside of the parameters of all the laws that church people have created to say that you're good Christians. Because true believability is going to look at what Jesus did, what Jesus said, how Jesus prayed, and we're going to try to operate in that sensibility as opposed to just kind of making up what makes us feel best. And that's what churches do pretty well. And I would almost say, if you need to if you can't ask someone that's a part of this Slack line, talk to Bucky and Angel about good church rules, good church goers, and what that looks like. And they'll talk to you for hours about what that looks like. And when you see that, as Bruce used to say, run away. Run away. Other things that jump out for you about the themes of this portion of the Lord's Prayer?
I just want to say that if you look at that list, each thing looks to me like it builds upon the other. So, for example, if you can't be a good emissary or ambassador if you don't have the things that precede it, if there's not unity in your message, if you don't show belief or credibility in what you say you believe in, if you don't give God his proper glory or honor or renown in the things that you do and the actions you take, you're going to be a horrible emissary or ambassador.
I appreciate that, Steve, and it's cool that some of our great writings, first of all, Jesus's prayer, which is the real Lord's Prayer, is amazing when you take a look at this as the Lord's Prayer, because the components lend themselves to us even having a better prayer discussion with our Creator than the model prayer, which sometimes gets limited to just the words that Jesus used. But Paul does a good job of almost using this example when he talks about fruits of the Spirit. And Peter does a wonderful job when he talks about the maturity that Christians should have when he says, and then you should have this, and this adds to this, and this adds to this. And so it's a progression of sorts that says we shouldn't, and Christians shouldn't expect to get it all at once. But doggone it, there should be a progression of sorts that says I'm moving and I'm growing, and that growth is going to lead me ultimately, because here the idea is to be good ambassadors and good emissaries. And that means that if I am the king of Zimbabwe and I send Gene out as my ambassador and my emissary, part of the reason that you revere and you honor him is because he represents me, even though I'm not there. And that's what believers should really strive to be, is little Jesuses, because those may be the only Jesuses that they come into contact with. And that includes at least these four themes, and certainly maybe some more, that the believer should identify with, and should not be ashamed to discuss, to say, where are you on this particular scale? This is the kind of accountability that believers should be able to have with each other and say, when have you been a representation of the glory of Jesus? How are you believable in your Jesus walk, in your life walk, in a way that says you're a good ambassador? How are you and me in unity in terms of what it is that Jesus did for us? And those are fair, and those are fair questions. They should be fair questions. But I would challenge you that Christians don't ever bother to have this kind of accountability checkup with each other, because you're stepping on my toes.
Two things. Number one, the unity you just hit on. There are some folks that are looking at the church and going, you know what? They can't get along with each other. Why do I want to be a part of their fight? Number one. Number two, when we are properly representing the Lord, there's an aversion the world has to the Lord, and so we can expect the same response they gave him to be what we get as well.
Agreed.
Preston, I want to hijack for a minute. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like a hijack, but really it's not. There's a lady I know kind of through Facebook, and they had a big protest in Honolulu again on Friday about opening the world up here, because we have almost no cases. And she posted a couple of pictures of people that had signs about churches reopening. And she asked in her post, she goes, "Where are all the men of God? Why aren't you here defending the churches?" And I chose not to respond, just because I didn't want to get something started. But that was, I never read in Scripture of Jesus carrying signs. I just never see that in Scripture. And I'll just say it real quick. Nothing against you if you want to call the governor's office or do those kind of things, to say, don't trample on our rights. That's cool. But I feel like, and I'm sorry to say this because Gene and I both are alumni there, but Jerry Falwell was responsible for a lot of the conflating of Christianity and conservative politics. And I believe that we have begun as a group to be more known by our politics than by our law. And it has damaged our credibility seriously. And so I feel like I'd rather us be not so tone deaf about what's going on in the world. Everybody else isn't gathering together. We're fighting for our rights here. I'm ready when we're ready, quite frankly. But it just seems like it's all this mush of political activism as opposed to being about Jesus, quite frankly. And so I think it damages our credibility when it's all said and done.
I don't think you hijacked this portion of the conversation at all, Bruce. I think that smartly, as you mentioned, that Jerry's religious right is helping believers get involved in politics was a good thing, but also the backlash is now a lot of believers believe because they're Republicans or they're conservatives that that's kind of what makes them righteous. And sometimes we don't take a look at what Jesus did when confronted with the politics of the day and how he responded to those. Give to Caesar what's Caesar, give to God what's God's is really key if you take a look at that the right way. And so I think, again, like you said, Bruce, when we're pushing back, when there's a violation of our rights, and maybe our God-given rights and then our constitutional rights, we need to put those in the right order, and we need to be eloquent enough to say to people how to measure us on those two stages. But we're not. So Christians, what we do is we stand up for our faith, but our faith looks a whole lot like flag waving as opposed to Jesus ambassadorialship.
I look at Franklin Graham and what he's tried to do, carrying on his father's legacy, and with what happened to them when they went up gladly to help people in New York, set up a hospital and doing everything, and he just got crucified. But the way he handled it wasn't screaming and yelling back at him. It was like, putting out messages on TV. You can know Jesus too. And the way he's handled it has been beautiful, I think.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Franklin Graham because he's actually a really neat study. If you take a look at him growing up in the shadows of who's who's not even arguably, probably the greatest evangelist of our lifetimes. That's a really tough shadow to grow up in. And certainly he had his rebellious times to just sort of say, I don't want any part of this. And so watching him mature into this guy who's probably got the best sense of God graciousness, of a leader that's high profile in that regard is noteworthy. And we can learn a lot from that. And he's the kind of guy you almost should, if you tweet or if you post, you should let him know that those actions are noteworthy and they're admirable, because that's kind of the way to go. Is he essentially shook the dust off his sandals and kept moving down the road. And he didn't do that in a hate fashion. What he said is, okay, I'm going to pack up our traveling help show and go, but at the same time, Jesus is still Lord. And because of Facebook, because of Instagram, because we have such grandstanding opportunities to tell people our position, we feel like we need to blast somebody before we pack up our road show and go. And Franklin Graham did a really good job at saying, look, I stand for Jesus, and if you don't want that here right now, there's another town to move on to. And that's kind of what Jesus is talking about with dust the sand off your sandals and keep rolling. Sometimes what we get from that is Sodom and Gomorrah the place that you're leaving, and then go to the next town. So thanks, Bruce. No hijacking there at all. All right. So that whippersnapper Erica Pettit, she talked about an interaction a few weeks back that happened between her in Food Lion with a cashier. Do you all recall that? What did you think about that interaction? Okay, so Gina's saying kind of. Okay, so in a Reader's Digest format, Erica talked about going to the Food Lion across the street, and when she got to the counter to check out, she asked the young lady there how she was doing, and that young lady burst into tears, and they had an interaction where in the few moments that Erica had with this person before the next person in line was going to come around, Erica was able to share with her, and then and maybe in some ways to help to present a sense of calm for her, in that there was a believership that they shared, in addition to recognizing the realities of our current environment in which they both were part of. Erica was certainly a consumer, and the cashier was a person who has a job, but in many ways is required to be an essential person in the wake of all of this stuff that's been going on. So what did you think about that interaction that Erica shared a few weeks back?
Let me speak first. She has got stuff going on right now at the moment, so unfortunately she is not able to be here. But I'll tell you this about Erica. She doesn't like to be in the front. She doesn't like to be on the stage. She doesn't like to be, she is very much okay with being hidden, but moving things forward. But when my wife asks you how you're doing, it is not a casual question to just invoke, I'm supposed to say that because she truly means that. I'm very guilty of saying that to everybody because I'm supposed to. How you doing? Hey, what's up with you? Yo, the joke Eric and I like to talk about is if we went to a party with 100 people, I would talk to all of them for 2 or 3 minutes each. She would find 1 or 2, go deep with them and help them and encourage them. So when she says how you're doing, it is genuine for her. It is a real deal for her. She really is concerned. And that's harder for me because, I'm like, how you doing? If it's not good, just skip all that and go to the fact that, hey, I'm great and let's move on. And I think people know that, though. I think they see that. I think they feel it. I think they sense it when you're real about, are you very concerned? And I think, how many times have we talked about as a team being real and open in every moment, knowing people are looking, they're hurting. Pandemic aside, we don't need a pandemic for people to be hurting. We've done pretty good ourselves without a pandemic to go through pain. But I know that, for her, it's a very real thing. And that's convicting to me because a lot of the times for me, and I would even say more often than not, it is not a duty because I don't feel like I have to do it. It is just, I do it without thinking. She doesn't do that. It's very real for her. So if she, and I say to her all the time, she's like, and I don't really connect well with people. I'm like, no, the opposite is true. You connect really well with people because it's real. I waved at 30 people today and don't remember any of them. You talked to 3 people today and probably changed their lives moving forward.
I think it's funny, Matt, that you would hit on those particular highlights of the contrast between you and Erica, because in many ways, that's what stood out for me when I thought about that, and not the contrast between you and Erica, but that Erica could spend 30 seconds to maybe 2.5 minutes if the cashier is good. And in that 2.5 minutes or so, that impacted both of their lives so significantly that I think both of them walked away with a sense of positivity, with a sense of certainly unity. I thought that given what Erica described, there was a sense of believability about her, that in that few short moments, there was a sense of the honor and the glory that Erica gets to share in because of the Lord. And I thought she was an amazing ambassador at probably one of the most corny opportunities that we continue to experience during this quarantine, if you've gone out for groceries, unless you're having them delivered now. And when you take a look at the filled in my answer above, the importance of these themes, mission and Great Commission minded, at work oriented. That's kind of what I think that that Erica was doing. And what I mean by that is Christians are really cool about missions. Christians like missions, and they especially like mission trips. That's not at all what Erica did on this day. Erica was at work on mission, and she didn't need to be about the Great Commission here, because the Great Commission, this person with whom she was interacting already has a relationship with Jesus. But what she was doing was being a good ambassador with this person in order to find out that she didn't need to be about the Great Commission. And so that mission mindset is not one where we go on a mission trip or we give some bucks to send the youths to Bangladesh. It's a matter of recognizing that the mission field is probably next door to you, to the neighbors that you don't know, or to the neighbors who might be Islamic, or the neighbors who might be Church of Latter-day Saints. It's an at-work mindset that Erica practiced in a short snippet when she just went across the street to the food line. And so if you take a look go ahead, Matt.
I want to add to that because that's so important what you just said. And I want to echo what Bruce said a minute ago, because I think sometimes Christians, we're so busy defending what we believe, we very rarely have an opportunity to share what we believe. Because we want to make sure everybody knows we're right before we actually tell them, here's how this could help you. And we never seem to get past that. And my kid asks me all the time, how do we reach our neighbors? How do we reach them? And I don't know if this is going out on Facebook, so I got to be careful how I share this. But the answer is not to go over and say, let's sit down and let me tell you why I am right and you are wrong. Like, that's how we think many times overarching gets to somebody's heart. No, now that is really offensive and defensive about everything. You have to love them where they are. You have to, regardless of, you can't be right first. You have to love first. But we're so fallen and depraved, and I'm first in line, so I'm talking about me, that I was like, I want you to know I'm right first, and when I feel that I'm right, then maybe I can help you, because I got to help me first. It's so backwards. And you know who modeled how to do it better than anybody was Jesus. Just read the crucifixion story over that weekend. I mean, somehow we do the opposite of that, and I don't know why the Great Commission's not working for us.
The notes that are that Sarah's posted in terms of my thinking about Erica is that through Erica's being a good ambassador, she discovered that there was a believer there struggling with the weight of the current world predicament. Erica, even though it was a short snippet, invested some purposeful, intentional time. And the brief section, you heard me say this earlier, seemed to be a positive one for both Erica and the cashier. And the reason I know that it was positive for Erica is she had to tell us about it. And so sometimes when we have in our church's testimony time, we want to tell this story, but we want to tell all the details and all the intricacies. And we don't really need to know all of that stuff. We kind of need to know, how did Jesus manifest in your life in a reality way this past week? So it's not that your testimony from 4 years ago or 40 years ago is not important, that your resume list of the Jesus things you've done is not important. It is. But how did Jesus show up in the last week or the day so that you were a good ambassador and that you know that Jesus lives, and you also shared that Jesus lives with somebody else? And that's what I got from Erica's interaction, which during this time of quarantine, people are in many ways so focused on themselves and getting over their fear and their anxiety and their sorrow and their misery. They're not necessarily concerned for the other person in the way that Jesus would be if he were walking amongst us now. Next question on your flow sheet says, I don't
think we really get, I apologize. I don't think we really get how people are being affected by this. I'm including myself, because I didn't get it until really last night. I took something over to my mom for Mother's Day, and I had actually invited her over to our place today to be part of this. And when we spoke on the phone last night, it was clear to me, my mother is afraid if she sees 2 flakes, she parks the car, okay? She doesn't drive in the snow. This pandemic is like a bazillion snowstorms for her. She's terrified. And she's over 80, so she's in that risk group, And so she's going, I've got to stay 6 feet away. I've got to wear my mask. I've got to shop at this time when all the rest of the folks that are like me are shopping. And she's just terrified. And I don't think she's by herself. I think that there are a lot of folks that this is the Black Plague to them. This is going to be the end for somebody, and it may be me. And that's the way they're seeing it. And we need to, I think, like Erica did, have some compassion for these people. We don't often think about a grocery store clerk as a first responder, but they're part of that essential group, and they're having to be there. And there's a real fear that they've got that somebody's going to come in and give them something that they really don't want. So I want to just add that, because there are people out there like this clerk that are, and like my mom, who are really afraid of what the end result's going to be.
Oh, push the little microphone. Should look like a little pill.
I had the opportunity, you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I had the opportunity this week a couple of times. On Thursday, I had to go to work for some training for us to be able to go back to work. And so we were there for a couple of hours learning some stuff. And my boss says, "Is that everything? Have we done it all? Have we got everything?" And I said, "No, actually, we haven't." I said, we need to pray. I said, when all else fails, we need to pray. And she looked at me real strange, and I was like, I would like to pray over the salon and over us so God could protect us. And she's like, okay. So she allowed me to pray over the salon and over all the employees that were there, and I felt honored to be able to do that. So a couple of the girls came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you for that. It made me feel a lot better." And I have an elderly lady that I do every week, and I talk with her, and she, every time I talk to her, she's down in the dumps because she lives alone, and she hasn't been, her children won't let her go out anywhere or have any visitors or anything. So I finally got permission to go to her house and fix her hair. And while I was there, she's like, "You just don't know how much I appreciate this, and how wonderful this makes me feel and everything." So just to have someone to sit with her and talk with her. And I also prayed with her, and tears were coming down her eyes, and she said that that it really made her feel so much better, because I think she suffers from some depression as well. But it made me feel really good to make her feel better too. So it was a really good week.
So what Angel just described is, you can hit your little mic so it doesn't feedback. Same little thing you hit before. So the thing that Angel just described is the thing that got Erica resonating with me yesterday. Is I had every intention for us to go down a certain road of learning, and then I had a couple of encounters, one at our refuse station, better known as the dump, and one out shopping. And both of them resulted in the thing that you heard Angel say twice, which is, I really appreciate that you would stop and do this for and with me. And then all of a sudden, there's two reasons that Erica has lingered with me. One we'll talk about later, that dad blasted rule follower. And then I said that aloud, didn't I? And this may be on Facebook. Okay. And then the second thing was this encounter that Erica had, and then it swept back for me in a way that I hadn't really put a number on previous to that. You guys ever have this experience where you've always wanted a certain vehicle, and let's say it's a let's say it's a a Volkswagen Beetle. No one makes those anymore, but let's just say it's that. Um, and you go out of your way and you finally get it, and you think you have a one-of-a-kind thing until this magical thing happens once you get the Beetle. Now you see that everyone seems to have a Beetle too. But before you got the Beetle, you didn't realize that everybody seems to own a Beetle. And that's what happened in this interaction, or these interactions that I had yesterday, is that I didn't realize how often they were occurring in some ways because I thought they were anomalies until I thought back to Erica's exchange that she shared with us. And then I thought back on the past 4 to 6 weeks, and I've gone, I guess this has happened a lot in part because of maybe how I've tried to operate during this whole quarantine and shutdown status. And yesterday jumped out for me in such a huge way prior to us getting together, especially on the heels of our governor saying, now you may all consider meeting again. And then I thought, well, how does this apply? And having these two folks have this response in two very, very different settings says that we can make a difference. We really can make a difference when we're actively in an at-work mindset. And it may seem like it's small and it's not on the stage or the level of a Franklin Graham, but we're supposed to be working our Jerusalem first anyway. And that means if it's your Henrico, if it's your Hanover, if it's your Clayton, if it's your Hawaii, if it's you need to be working your local grounds first before you think about Samaria and the uttermost parts of the world. And so you take a look at, I'm not going to ask you the next question. I just want you to think back on it. What similar encounters you've had since this whole 6 weeks or this whole quarantine thing had. I want you to just think back on those, and you can answer those, or you can come up with similar situations over the past time. But what I do want you to think about this is the next question is, what's the point about situations like Erica's? Do they matter? Why or why not? And you can go ahead and fill that in, Sarah. I want to show you what frequently even believers have as responses to Erica's kind of situation. And here they are. I don't really know those people. Well, we're all really pretty busy. I'm not really very interested in doing that. I'm more interested in me and my stuff. That's too embarrassing what you're asking me to do. Someone else is going to do that instead of me. I'm not a pastor, a priest, or a preacher. It's just a pretty stupid waste of time. Now, especially on Sunday or Wednesdays, and those are kind of the church gathering days, most Christians are not really going to say these things aloud. It doesn't mean that that's not what's in their head, though. And that's why you don't have more Bucky and Angel opportunities. That's why you don't have more Tony McDonald situations where people are walking up to folks and saying, do you know Jesus? Because we think the reason we don't ask some of that is one of these 7 bullets you've seen. That's why we don't ask people, what's going to happen after you've accumulated all your wealth and then you die? We don't ask that because of one of these 7 things here. Before I continue going on, your thoughts. What do you think about that? That's pretty insulting stuff I just put down there.
Preston, I want to say this. The first thing I want to say is second to the last one is alliterated. That's a way to go, Preston. That's my favorite one now. You know what's interesting, when Sarah put those up there and I began looking at them, the first thought that struck me, so I make sure I read through every one of them. It's interesting to me that the reasons you listed, which are so powerfully true, every one of them, and probably every one we could come up with, have everything to do with us. Nothing to do with Jesus at all. I don't really know these people. Well, of course you don't. Jesus does, though. We're busy. He was busy about that. He was about his Father's business. I have meat to eat that you don't know about. If you remember that setting at the well, the disciples are like, what are you doing talking to her? And who fed you? And what meat are you talking about? We just went and waited in line in a city we don't want to be in for you. It's all about us. We are so self-centered, and we don't even know it. I read this quote one time. It said, "We're so self-centered that we don't think we are." So I just think when we approach situations like that, it's about what if they say no? What if they're mean? What if they reject my message? What if I foul them? What if I mess up my words? I used to say this and then I'll shut up. But it just overtook me that every one of these has everything to do with us, has nothing to do with Jesus. We're so concerned about our image. I used to say this early on in the first church I worked at, which was a Baptist church, and I realized later that it hit a core with everybody, but nobody would ever repeat it. And later they're like, I can't believe you said that. They didn't tell me that till like 5 years later. I'm like, thanks for letting me know in the moment 5 years later. I used to say this statement about how unfriendly churches could be. And when I built my first thing, which was a Sunday school class, which was where I learned how to grow things, I got to the point where I realized we'd have guests come in and nobody would welcome them or greet them. And they would maybe nod and whatever, and it blew me away. I was 25, 24, and it just didn't make any sense to me. I was new in ministry. I'm thinking, man, someone was walking. I don't need all of you to go over there and jump on them and get them on the ground and show the Bible, but be nice, say something, take them a donut or a coffee. And so I remember after a couple of probably months, 6 months or so, having an entire message one morning in Sunday school on just interacting, and I made this statement: I'd rather you trip on a chair, fall down, spill your coffee, and cuss 3 times to greet them than not to greet them at all. And someone later said, that's pretty bold. I said, Blink, it was. No, I didn't say that. But my point is, we're so concerned that what if I mess up? What if it doesn't go well? What if I don't say the right thing? What if I share something that's not doctrinal? Like God's thrown off by that. Your whole life is not doctrinal. Our whole lives are backwards. So it's such a powerful list you have there, and it's so about us and not about Jesus.
Another side route to this from Matt, what Matt said, what happens in the legalistic world is the striving for perfection. I'm going to look just right, I'm going to act just right, I'm going to do just right. When I am following all these rules, then I'll be okay to do these things. And when you're not meeting those rules, you're not feeling up to being outgoing like that. And so you're constantly feeling like, okay, I'm a failure in this area, in this area, in this area, so I really cannot do this. And this convicts me. Preston, you're stepping over my toes today, because I don't do that. I don't have that sensitivity. I am too much about me. That's all there is to that. And God wants us to be hungry people showing other hungry people where to find bread. We need to look at it like that, and not just think about the Lord's perspective, but also the perspective of these people that are in need. And again, I'm talking to myself. They're in need, and we know the answer. We know what will help them. And I don't get that. I don't manifest that. So this is hurting, Preston.
I appreciate that, Gene, and I appreciate that because it's real easy. Our last batch of lessons have been about us, about working on us to help us work through our sorrow, our misery, our tearfulness, our discomfort in what's happening right now in our culture. This lesson, the gist here, is really about other folks, and that Erica person is the one who helped us to recognize that through this all, certainly we need to be strong and stalwart and soldiers of the cross, but But what does that look like? And that's kind of what this lesson, this study is what does it look like being stalwart soldiers of the cross? It's not about always battling. It's about being on mission. And what does mission look like? That's what we're talking about today. And so those excuses that we have right there is really why we're not better at being good ambassadors. And so when I look at Bucky, when I look at Angel, when I look at Tony, when I look at Tony, those are folks that by the end of the interaction are going to ask you something about Jesus. The rest of us, for the most part, kind of fall into the reason that we didn't do that is one of the items that are here on the list. You can pick your poison. So, and I don't think it's just you, Gene. I think it's all of us. And so when we're saying being intentional, being purposeful during the course of your week, this is what we're talking about in terms of equipping today. Hanging out with like-minded people, because you can talk Jesus and none of us are going to say, we don't have time to talk about Jesus. We're not interested in what you have to say today. But tomorrow, that's where you face the challenge of getting over these 8 bullets. Tomorrow, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Wednesdays and Sundays, we're good at it because we're all hanging out with people in the club. Now, there are a lot of folks that are essential folks in the battlefields that we're talking about, the battlefields due to the quarantine, and we need to be available for them, and some of that also comes into play with these 8 items. And even the next question is going to talk more about boots on the ground. How do believers encourage and strengthen each other? Go ahead and fill that out, Sarah. So some of this is going to get on people's, is going to make people a little mad at me, especially given the quarantine and that your governors of your respective countries have told you that certain things are off limits. So I'm going to tell you what I think the Bible and Jesus's behavior says about strengthening and encouraging each other. Meeting. Ooh. Whoops, sorry about that. Hymns and spiritual songs. I can't tell you often enough that Christianity is the only faith, and I'm not saying religion, that requires its participants, its congregates to sing. And so, look, the singing is not just limited to singing some really cool praise and worship songs in a building. Sometimes you need to help somebody understand that great is thy faithfulness in the short encounter when you meet them in the grocery store, that his mercies are renewed every day. So you can sing to one another in songs and spiritual songs. And I would also tell you it's a really cool way for you to memorize your scripture. So you want to call on something, either to paraphrase, remember the song, because there's probably a song about it. Ooh, the third one. Ooh, kisses. Now, I put that there because if we were certainly all together, it would create a neat thing where people would be looking at me and I would be able to respond to them. But because you're out in WebEx land, you're on your best behavior. So I could really dress this up and say, holy kisses. But really what I wanted us to get there is touching matters. Touching matters. And that's why Paul tells us that we can greet each other with kisses. Now, our culture, because we're Americans, we don't do that. If you're European, that would make a whole lot more sense. But I would tell you, even Americans, watch what happens in this age of the quarantine when you stick your hand out. I got you. Watch what happens. And so, believers, there's a way you can ask permission, but I would suggest to you strongly that strengthening and encouraging involves touching. And on the 2 occasions I encountered yesterday, I got to do that. And in fact, the funny thing is, the folks were even doing it toward me before I was able to extend it to them, which says that especially in a quarantine situation, especially when an 80-year-old lady is feeling like everything is off base, folks need some hugging. Folks need some touching. Folks need a spiritual kiss. So you've got to be okay with the 5 weeks we had in the past of the Lord taking care of you and recognizing that some of these connectors strengthen and encourage. I appreciate Angel talking about getting a chance to pray over her work team. Real prayer is what I have here on the list. And look, here's what I'm talking about real prayer. Some of us that are longtime church people, and we've got some longtime Baptists in the group here. Prayer is intimidating because it's in a whole different language, a language that none of us speaketh welleth. And if you're in an environment when you have to prayeth liketh thateth, I'm not praying because I ain't got the chops. I'm too embarrassed to do that. And so, as opposed to being maybe the last option, and I understand how in Angel's environment and a workplace that's not Christian, prayer is the last thing on their list. But folks, conversation with your Lord Savior should be daily, should be regularly, and it should be a conversation. And real prayer is going to make itself manifest like that, as opposed to the thoueth, theeth, and doeth. All of that stuff that makes people too afraid and embarrassed to pray. And that's why sometimes when Erica has that, when we have an Erica opportunity, and you can see the next thing is taking the time, then that lends itself to Brother Matt. If you mean hi when you encounter someone, say hi. But if you say, how are you doing? Then doggone it, take the time to hear how the person is doing. If you mean hi, say hi. If you mean howdy, say howdy. But if you say, how are you doing? Then you be ready to get the answer, because the answer may include sciatica. It may include a whole bunch of gobbledygook that you didn't anticipate. But guess what? When you open the door to how are you, then you take the time to be there for the answer. And some of that be there for the answer includes this. Once you learn what the person's agenda is or the stuff that's in their baggage ramp, then offer to have, especially if it's a believer, offer to have a discussion with your Lord and Savior with them. That's not going to be thee, thou, and thoueth. That's just a discussion. That's a natural opportunity for you to share in the glory that you already have through the unity that you share. And I also tell you, because Christians are really good at that. Well, I'm going to pray about that. I'm going to pray about that. Pray right then. We're always going to pray about something. And we may not even get around to praying about it once we get around to thinking about it. Because when we thought about it, it's like 2 weeks later. So when you're in the store with that person and they're telling you how impacting this situation is, and you have the opportunity without holding up the 50 people behind you in the line, pray with the person and take an opportunity to just say a few words to your Creator to alleviate the junk in their day. It makes a difference. And then reminders, folks. You can't always go quoting scripture, because sometimes, Bible thumpers do that all the time. But what you can do is you can paraphrase the Jesus stuff that Jesus did, the situations that Jesus encountered, the allegory, the parables of Jesus, and you can remind people of Jesus's greatness and how, and this too shall pass. And here's why I say, and this too shall pass. We know how all of this stuff works out. Quarantine, world war, famine, rumors of war. We know how all of that stuff works out. So you need to take the time to remind each other that, and this too shall pass. Your thoughts? Just made somebody mad.
I love it. I love it, Preston. The idea, we always say that, I'll pray about that. Which basically means I don't really want to talk about that right now. And the quickest way for me to move on is to say I'm going to pray about it because it sounds spiritual and it gets me away. I've made when I can pray with somebody and they ask me to pray for them, one of the habits I have formed, I don't always get it right, but I do the majority of the time, is that internally I'll pray right then because I will not remember to do that later. I just won't. Because there was a lot of guilt in my life for years as a pastor, people leaving the church, the traditional stand by the back door, make everyone tell you it was the greatest sermon they've ever heard, which we all know is a lie. And they'd be, would you pray about this? I would pray between that handshake and the next one. I would pray for that situation, knowing that God, he got it, So anyway, I also wanted to point out number 3, the kisses. This hit me while you're saying this. This is so deep. Y'all need to probably buckle in. You could alliterate. It could be holy kisses and then Hershey kisses. They're alliterated and they're both deep and powerful. That's all I got.
Just nuggets of wisdom falling from the heavens. Other comments on this stuff? Okay. So my last answer, or my last question to you as we begin to close out today, because it looks like we've got some other component of this that we'll need to continue into next week, and that's okay. And next week we'll actually get a chance to meet, so we're going to try to figure out how to meet and WebEx coincidentally at the same time. So what a joy, it'll be wonderful getting together. Okay. So why should believers encourage and strengthen each other? Why? And don't put anything up there yet, Sarah. Let's see what the peanut gallery has to offer.
First, answer some of that question. As an example, yesterday I have a sister in Christ that's in Maryland. She's a nurse. We talked for about 45 minutes yesterday. And with this stuff going on, her being a nurse, being a godly, loving woman, she still had anxieties. She still had a little bit of fear. She was telling me she was still even wearing her mask in her backyard, while she's out piddling. And we talked, and of course, we don't get into, and I see a lot of this on Facebook. I've been in Facebook jail now 3 times in the last month. Because like I said before, that's my ministry right now is Facebook. But I've seen so many Christians going, what have you got to fear about? What have you got the anxieties about? Don't you believe in God? Where's your faith? All of this. You should be relying strictly on that instead of reaching out and going, let's talk. And with Mo, she just needed somebody to talk to yesterday. And here's like I said, a emergency room nurse. And she's facing this corona stuff every day in the hospitals. She's in the old folks' homes. She needed to talk, and it wasn't so much about where's my faith, none of this. It was just a shoulder to lean on and pray together. And that's what we done over the phone. I was like, okay, Mo, let me pray with you. And we prayed together over the phone, and she in turn turned around and prayed with me for me. Right. So it's the lifting up, to reach out. It is nothing but a phone. A lot of people don't want to do the contact thing. Reach out on the phone and talk. I don't mean a text. I mean actually, hear their voice. And there's so many ways of just reaching out, and people, as well as I do, we're back to the thing of, if they don't see the love of Jesus in you, they're not going to listen to a word you got to say. And that's like with Erica, they saw that in her. That woman saw that in her. She saw the compassion. She saw the need to, I can reach out to her.
Yeah, I think Bucky's point is so prominent in that it reminds me of the story that greeted me last Monday that I've forgotten now. And I'm sure some of you have read it, probably Steve as well. The nurse who committed suicide. And if you read the article all the way through, the thing that probably jumped out for me that was the most striking is that she was it said she was a devout Christian. And so what that tells you is that even in a time like this, where folks are supposed to have their anchor sure in terms of knowing where their eternity lies, this nurse decided that this situation was too overwhelming and she needed to take her own life. Other thoughts? Thank you, Bucky.
I think the biggest and this is perspective, okay? I think the biggest reason we need to do this was the first answer you gave on your sheet, the unity. If we are part of each other, it behooves us to encourage each other. We're part of a body. If I cut my finger and just ignore it, the rest of the body is going to get affected by it. If part of us is hurt, part of the body is hurt, no Landry jokes here. If part of the body is hurt, we need to encourage that part of the body and be a part of healing that part of the body because they're connected to us.
As we finish up our learning time, by the way, appreciate all of you attending. I appreciate your participation. Somebody turn to John 13:35, and when you get there, read that out loud so we can hear it. Because I think that that's going to be the overarching theme of this week's study in terms of the closure of the Lord's Prayer in John 17 for the believers, and I think it culminates in many ways in John 13:35. So somebody read it out loud once you get there.
Reading from the New American Standard. By this all men will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. That's almost like what I just said.
Absolutely. And I think, hearkening back to what Steve said, that they'll know that we're his by our love one for another. That is unity. That's credibility. That's believability on display. It is good ambassadorship. It is all of the components that say that we're on our master's mission, that make us able to, in our obituary, almost write, Preston Redding, a bond servant of Jesus Christ. Now, I don't see any obituaries that way, but it would be my hope that that's not just our obituary, but that would almost be how we would introduce ourselves to someone, or if there was a dais or a speaking opportunity, that would almost precede all of the other accolades about how great you are.